So 17 years ago today was a very, very significant thing that happened in the market, well, especially for me. So 2008, you had a crash that was just pounding the market. And we're talking globally. Everybody felt it. August 8th of 2008, today, was a crash that affected me and my family significantly in itself. So I left my office that morning, was going to go take 3 days, and it was a Friday just like today. I was going to take 3 days of my life. I was going to sit on a Harley. It was a Road King, and I was just going to ride through Reserve, New Mexico, and get my head clear because there's a lot of stuff happening in my world. I just needed to just deal with things. There was a significant change, but I still had a decent income, decent business was happening, and so I'm heading off, and I'm not 15 minutes into that ride, and a 17-year-old in his dad's truck wasn't paying attention. 80 plus miles an hour, he took me out. I got pushed into another car. I went flipping. And I don't know if you've been in Arizona. Right now, we've seen 118 degrees this week. I don't know if you've been here in August, but August 8th, or at least at any time, is not the best time to lay on the pavement for any length of time. And I think I was there for 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes before the paramedics came, scooped me up, got me into the hospital. My first memory is about midnight that night. I'm trying to figure out where I was at. My memory is completely gone. And except for some distant stuff, and I was able to communicate with a shadowy figure that was there, which happened to be my wife, and find out for what was probably the 100th time she had to tell me that day about the happenings of the day. So following that, I had two shattered legs. My right lung collapsed that following day. Had a bunch of broken ribs and a head injury. Even though I had a helmet, massive crack in that helmet, that put me in a position where my memory would recycle every 3 to 4 minutes. So I'm kind of in a new place all the time. So when I wheeled out of there a few weeks later, I went in at about 190 pounds, 6 foot tall, had a net worth over approaching $4 million. I got wheeled out at 156 pounds with a negative net worth of 1.5 million. Everything disappeared on me completely. I came back to an obliterated industry. And the worst of it was a memory that would continue to recycle. So I carried one of those yellow notepads and I would write things down. And I had to learn there how to train my memory back. Now, I had an attorney that came to me, my attorney at that point, and he said, okay, here is the assets of the family that caused this. And I asked him, is it going to make me whole? And of course it would not. It was far from it. I had to make a decision at that point. Is it worth pursuing this? And I put myself for that moment into the life of the father of that 17-year-old. What was the few months that had transpired like for him? What was the things he was experiencing at that point? And I figured it had to be one of the most miserable experiences, much more miserable than me because he didn't know. I held the cards. And because one, it definitely wasn't going to make me whole. I had a long slog ahead of me. It was not going to impact my life very much at all to have that. So I went ahead and let that go. Signed that we would do nothing, let that go. I've never spoke to those folks. I've never heard from them, and I don't need to. But I did know that I had young kids at that time. My oldest was 10 years old. My youngest was 2. And there was 2 others in there. I knew they were going to start driving someday, and I did not ever want to have to experience what they have had to go through because of this moment's carelessness. So by the grace of God, have I not had to experience that? And I pray that I never have to, and that doesn't happen within my family, and that any little sacrifice that may be enough to ensure that we don't have that. So why did I share that with you? A couple things. Well, one, you may felt like you were wronged by somebody. Somebody did something to you. There's a lot of investors I'm working with right now that are going through some things because of what others chose to do, because of their circumstances. And it's costing you a lot. I've been there. I understand that. I've been through it in real estate investments since then. I've lost over $1 million in investments since then. But I've also had a monster upside where I'm still here. I'm not in the best of circumstances right now with the way the market's going as far as my business is concerned. I can be in a lot better space, but there's choices I'm making that are a necessity to not focus on me, but focus on other things to ensure that we have a future. And that the future is bright for what we're trying to do. And we got a lot of things we're cooking up. So as you're looking at things that's happening in your world right now, and you're debating exactly who screwed you and why did you get screwed and who can I blame? Guys, it's not helping you to do that. Just understand that does not help you to do that. So let's do a little bit, tinfoil hat time here. So, you probably didn't know I'm a half-breed hairless. That's what's my nationality. So I'm going to do tinfoil hat thing today, and let's talk about 2008 for a second. Let's go all the way back since we brought it up. So let's look at what happened over the years. So you have leading up to 2008, you've got the ability to do 100% financing with no income and no asset verification for real estate investors buying houses. And everybody was buying houses and they're building up all their revenue and or all their assets. But you weren't getting a whole lot of renters out there. And they were just flipping these houses as much as they could. And then the music stopped in 08 and people couldn't pay for those houses. And as a result of that, foreclosures started to happen. Now I experienced that, but I experienced it from a wheelchair on a morphine drip. So it was easy for me to deal with it because when they called, wanting to know why am I not paying my bills, I faxed them my first week's medical bill of $1.7 million and they backed off and I was able to negotiate. So I had a better outcome than a lot of people did because of that. Now I still had a 460 credit score I had to crawl back from, big mess in my world, but I at least dealt with it in a different way than most had to. So you think about that. A lot of people lost these houses, short sales, foreclosures. Who bought up a lot of that stuff? Who benefited from it? There's monster entities out there that bought a lot of real estate during those windows of time because it was very, very cheap. And then the investors started coming that did not get caught up in that had money and they started investing. And that's where I got tied with the real estate investor that was going nationally. From Arizona to Indiana to Texas to Tennessee to Missouri. And I started building those relationships from 2011 on. And that's where my business started to really grow. But when you look at all the money, the housing that was snapped up by the hedge funds, and then you start seeing everything peaking out because they started doing quantitative easing in 2009. Quantitative easing driving the interest rates down, right? So if we look at these charts that I've got, and we start looking at what they pulled off with the quantitative easing over that period of time, I'm going to go ahead and just share screen with you. There we go. So we look at the quantitative easing that was enacted in 2008 right here. And all this is money from the U.S. Treasury and other investors following along with the U.S. Treasury until they did quantitative tightening. Now, all that means people were getting money very, very cheap all through here. And that very cheap money was getting people buying. And as they bought, they drove the prices through the roof, higher and higher and higher. So anybody who held large chunks of real estate, right, these hedge funds, their balance sheets were going through the freaking roof. And then you do quantitative tightening, which means they're pushing up the interest rates. People stop buying. They're now, and then you get into a point of COVID, right? Well, COVID before quantitative tightening, you get into COVID, which drives the interest rates down even further. More people buying, huge demand, but because of COVID, you shrink the ability to add to the supply. Now, you look back at 2008, they stopped that, they shrunk the supply, stopped the supply. People weren't building like they did pre-2008, so they made that a finite resource. Now you go to COVID, it even becomes a more finite resource because they're not able to build as much because you can't get the supplies. The shipping is completely hindered. Remember all those ships with containers sitting in the harbors, not able to dock? Think about all these things. What happened to the value of real estate through the freaking roof, houses, because you couldn't build it, right? Now, then you get a quantitative tightening, pushing the prices, maintaining the high prices because of the ability to the squeeze on the inventory, still high demand, pushing the rates up, slowing all that stuff down. Where do we sit today? Everything's going vertical. We're still looking at a lot of people building apartment buildings. If you can buy and get in on some of the deals I'm talking about for the single family residence, you are now purchasing what I believe will be the highest value per square foot real estate on the planet, period, because of all that I was just talking about. A little bit of tinfoil hat stuff, but it could have easily been orchestrated. In my opinion, there could have some easy orchestrations with all that. Powers that be, pulling people in, giving them our money, buying out, giving these banks these bailouts they never had to pay back. Some say they did pay back. I don't know. I was not in those rooms. So let's get to the market today. Tinfoil hat moment over. Let's see what we're dealing with right now. So we had in the economic calendar, since the last conversation was just yesterday, we had continuing claims and initial claims comes out today. Initial claims up a bit from where they were anticipated. Continuing claims up quite a bit from where they were on the last reading. So we're still seeing some difficulty in the labor market, as well as unit labor costs have dropped. So the cost per labor has dropped a little bit. So those demands have dropped. What has that done to our market? We had that big jump from that, I would say a mislabel that happened. You heard all that talk about, but it went up, it stalled out. And now we're back down right here on this level where we're talking about. We had a really gross mislabeling from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shoved us up there and stalled us. kept trying to get above it, but went right back down to it. And we've now pierced down below into that same box I've referenced. We're down in the box a little bit. We'll see how this plays out, but that's where we are within the market. Stalled out. Anybody, we're at our peak as far as interest rate, the low parts of interest rates, peak of the market. We'll see how things are. Maybe it goes up there, but we also have that box above it from quantitative easing that's going to stop from going any higher. I believe we're at our lowest interest rates that we're going to see in the conventional world. DSCR world, completely different. You want to understand the difference between DSCR and conventional? Call me. We'll get into greater detail. But this is what I got for you today, and I'll talk to you guys on Tuesday.